Chuck, read the scripture from now on. That was good. Like James Earl Jones. That was good. That's not the only scripture. We got a lot I'm going to be going through. There's a lot recorded in Genesis. There's quite a bit. The whole biblical narrative is his life is it's profound. So let's see. I'm going to open in quick prayer too. God, we thank you for bringing all of us here today. God, what an incredible thing it is that each and every one of us have gathered here to worship you. God, we place our faith and trust in you. We look to you to be our provider, our sustainer, and God, our salvation. God, you have reached out and saved us, and we love you, and we thank you for just the redemptive plan that you put into motion, that you pursued us, and even when we didn't deserve it. So God, we thank you, and we look to you in these trying times where it looks like hopefully we're getting to the end of this 2-year pandemic, and there's a lot of tension in Ukraine and Russia and how that's going to affect the world and all the people there in that country. God, we just place our faith and trust in you that you have control of this situation like you have every single day up till now. God, you will continue to have control and be faithful to your people. So we thank you, we worship you, we love you. Amen. All right, to kind of break down where we're at, I'm going to be speaking about Jacob, but as Pastor Lorley said, we've been going through Genesis up till now. The Genesis is, Genesis means beginning, and this is, the beginning of God's creation of the world, and the beginning of God's people and God's covenant and His promises to these people, and it's also, we see it's the beginning of God's wonderful and redemptive plan of salvation for the world. And I was just talking to Dr. Crouchy just before this. When I grew up in church, a pastor's kid, and hearing all the Bible stories, I'm like, oh yeah, the God of the Old Testament, He's sort of like the angry God, the people are messing up, and He's like, has to fix everything, all their problems. But New Testament, it's God of love, everything's good and happy, and it's going up for everyone. But really going through Genesis, and you see the narrative of God's people and the history of the world and the history of the nation of Israel, man, God was faithful and good. And He, from the very beginning, we only got 2 chapters into the Bible, and then God said it was good. Man messed it up. They wanted to seize control, make their own decisions. And pretty much from then on, right away, after we, took control, wanted to make our own decision, God said, I'm going to put a plan into place where I can save you and redeem you for His plan and purpose. And so it's not this angry God up there, but God is, in His sorrow and His love for His people, put this plan together. So, like we said, Pastor Lorley, you preached a couple weeks ago about creation and mankind, how, God said it was good. Mankind was to reflect. I'm just giving you a little context so we can get into Jacob, so we know where we're going in case you missed a week. And God made man in His own image to reflect, to kind of take control of earth, and to be the steward of earth and to reflect God's image. But they decided, they were tempted, the serpent said, hey, you want to be like God? Even though they were already made in the image of God, they wanted to seize control and kind of make it more about their own goals, and went downhill from there. Sin came into the world, disease, chaos, and it quickly descended into chaos. And everyone was sort of making it about themselves, making a name for themselves. And God, a lot of times you think it's out of anger, but out of His sorrow, Scripture says He wanted to wash the earth clean. He wanted to make the earth clean from all this. But He found a man named Noah, which Scripture says Noah did all that God asked of him, and he was a righteous man. And so He took Noah and his family, and He saved them. Noah built an ark. He was faithful, and God saved them to start the world anew. Sadly, not much long after that, again, mankind, rebelled against God, and we see the Tower of Babel, the story of how mankind was all together. They had one purpose and goal, and it says that they wanted to make a name for themselves. It wasn't for God's glory. It wasn't to make a name for God, to reflect God's character in His creation. But they wanted to make a name for themselves, and God said again, I'm going to spread you across the earth. And from that point in Genesis, it was about God and his interaction with the world. And now, after the Tower of Babel and God spread the people across the land, God focuses in on one man, Abraham, where he made a promise. He said, if you're faithful, well, regardless, God said, I'm going to make you into a man with family, and many nations are going to come from your line, and I'm going to bless you, and those who bless you will be blessed, those who curse you will be cursed. And God's plan was to reflect him, to show himself to the world through Abraham and his descendants. So Abraham was faithful. He stepped out in faith. It said that Abraham believed God. Abraham believed in God. We believe in God. But Abraham believed God in his word, in his promise, and he stepped out in faith into a land he had never been before. And eventually, after 20 years, after decades of time, God finally came through on his promise, as he always does, and gave him a son named Isaac. And then God passed that promise on to Isaac. He says, I'm going to bless you, and you're going to, many nations and many people will come through your line. Like, the people will be like the sands on the seashore and the stars on the sky. And I'm going to bless you, and I'm going to bless the world through you. And Isaac, as we saw, like what Jacob said, they had to wait. They prayed. They couldn't have children, but God was faithful, and eventually they were able to have children. They had twins, and that's where we are. That's where we get to Jacob. So, as Chuck read, right away there's already conflict. I mean, I don't know if you have siblings. I have 2 older brothers, and I mean, before they're even born, I mean, they're already butting heads. They're already like, there's always problems. There's always something going on. We saw it with Cain and Abel. You see it. All these things like the brother, it's a good bond, but sometimes it doesn't always end up well. So God was faithful. Jacob and Esau, brothers, twin brothers. And now we're going to get into the first chapter of Jacob's life. We're going to be going through, there's a lot here, so I'm going to be reading through different stories as we get to the big turning point, a big change in Jacob's life. So Jacob and Esau grow up, and I'm going to get into chapter 25, starting in verse 29. You can go to the next one. We're going to be talking about Jacob's journey. And there's a lot. So there's a lot we're going to cover, so just stay with me. All right, Jacob 25, starting at verse 29. And it says, once when Jacob was cooking stew, Esau came in from the field because he was the outdoorsman, he was the hunter. He comes in and he was exhausted. And Esau said to Jacob, let me eat some of that red stew, for I am exhausted. Jacob said, well, sell me your birthright now. His birthright now, not birth right now. Anyways. Sell me your inheritance now. And Esau said, I'm about to die. What use is this inheritance to me? Jacob said, swear to me now. So he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau bread and lentil stew, and he ate and drank and rose and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright. And I mean, already you see Jacob, his name means to grab the heel. I mean, when he was born, as Chuck read, he came out of the womb grabbing his older brother's heel. And that's what Jacob means, is heel grabber. It means to deceive and to even trick. And I don't know what your name means. Like, a lot of people really don't talk about, like, oh, hey, what's the meaning of your name? I didn't earn my name when I was born. Jeremiah means Yahweh lifts up, or Jehovah exalts. I don't know if I've lived up to that name, or if they're like, hey, that sounds like a good name, we're going to pick that name. I don't know what you've earned. Maybe you've earned a name since you've been born that you're not really proud of. Like, who knows? But Jacob, right away, when he was born, earned his name, heel grabber. And now we see his brother comes in from the field. It says, as the eldest son, Isaac, as the eldest son of Isaac, Esau should have had inherited the covenant with God that Abraham had passed on to Isaac. But Esau traded his birthright, or his inheritance, to his younger brother, Jacob, for some stew when he was too hungry to consider what he was throwing away. So at this time, the patriarch, the head of the family, when they would pass away, the oldest son would basically be given all the possessions, all the birthright, all the inheritance. You may think that's not fair, but I mean, if they split up among everyone at that time, you get 4 generations down, no one has anything, and everyone starves, and it doesn't end well. So the oldest receives the blessing, the oldest receives the inheritance. And right away, Jacob is already living up to his name, the heel grabber, the cheater, the deceiver, and he's taking advantage of Esau's hunger to take the birthright away from him. And Esau, kind of responsible too. I mean, you could say Jacob tricked him and stuff, but Esau, he could have, I don't know how good that lentil stew was, or how good that bread was. I don't think it was, if I was like, hey, give me some steak or something. But, I don't think lentil stew is something that you should give away all of your future inheritance for. So I think they're both at fault there, but Jacob, is definitely living up to the meaning of his name. Now we're going to see the next chapter that we see in the Jacob narrative. I'm going to read out of chapter 27. Now their father, when Isaac was old, and his eyes were dim, so he could not see, he called Esau, his older son, and said to him, my son. And he answered, here I am. He said, behold, I am old. I do not know the day of my death. Now then, take your weapons, your quiver, and your bow, and go out to the field and hunt game for me. And prepare for me delicious food such as I love, and bring it to me so that I may eat, that my soul may bless you before I die. Now, Isaac and Rebekah, Abraham, Isaac, these aren't perfect people. They were God's chosen people. They were faithful. They believed God. They stepped out in faith. But also they're like us. We don't make all the right decisions all the time. And you see, as we said before, it says, Isaac loved Esau because he ate of his game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. They're already picking favorites, okay? So Jacob's at home all the time, and so I'm sure he's around his mother more, and they're like, he's probably a mama's boy. And Jacob's and Esau's like the manly man. He's out there hunting game. He's outdoorsy. But Isaac says, all right, I'm about to die soon, so I want to give you the blessing. And it says, after this, Rebekah was actually kind of snooping around, kind of eavesdropping on this that's going on, and Esau goes out to go hunt, and she goes to Jacob, is like, hey, so Isaac's about to bless your brother, and since, I'm sure this is kind of how it went, since you're my favorite, let's get that blessing. and so he's like, hey, so let's go get some goats, and we're gonna cook up some of his favorite meal, and you're gonna go in there into his tent, and he's blind, can't see you, which that's kind of messed up. I can't do that. And so let's make some food, and you're gonna go get that blessing. And I could just picture Jacob's he could have done the right thing and said, no, that's wrong. I've already cheated my brother once. Instead, he's like, yeah, that's not gonna work. What if he recognizes me? He's gonna curse me, and I'm not hairy, I don't smell like my brother. He's outside all the time. I've got my cologne, I'm inside, So instead of saying that's the wrong thing, he's really thinking this through. He's like, this isn't gonna work. And she's like, well, I'll take the blame if you get caught. But how about you just go put your brother's clothes on, and then we'll put some hairy goat skin on your hands and on your arms, and we'll see how this works. So I could see he's got the food, he's going into his dad's tent, and if that was me, I'd be like, there's no way this is gonna work. There's no chance. But he goes in, and Isaac says, are you really my son Esau? He answered, I am. Then he said, bring it near to me that I may eat of my son's game and bless you. So he brought it near to him, and he ate, and he brought him wine, and he drank. Then his father Isaac said to him, come near and kiss me, my son. So he came near and kissed him, and Isaac smelled the smell of his garments. Smart. And blessed him and said, see, the smell of my son is the smell of the field that the Lord has blessed. May God give you the dew of heaven and the fatness of the earth, and plenty of grain and wine, that people serve you and nations bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers, and may your mother's sons bow down to you. Cursed be everyone who curses you, and blessed be everyone who blesses you. As soon as Isaac had finished blessing Jacob, Jacob had scarcely gone out from the presence of Isaac his father. Esau, his brother, came in from his hunting, and he also prepared delicious food and brought it to his father. This is a crazy story. I mean, this is just like this is like a really good movie. Okay, like he's tricking his dad. He's probably like, oh man, I don't know when my brother's coming back. He gets the blessing, and he sneaks out. And right as he's leaving, his brother's coming in from the field. I mean, you can imagine like how awkward that would have been. And so then Esau gets all his food ready, and he goes in, and he's like, I brought you your food. And Isaac's like, who are you? He's like, I'm Esau, your firstborn. I'm here to get my blessing. And Isaac says, your brother came deceitfully, and he has taken away your blessing. Esau said, is he not rightly named Jacob, for he has cheated me these 2 times? He took away my birthright, and behold, now he has taken away my blessing. You see, blessings bestowed by a patriarch in this time before their death were considered to have a shaping influence on sons' lives. So it was hence the high stakes of the moment. Jacob comes in, he tells Isaac that he is Esau, he deceives his blind father into blessing him instead of his brother Esau. And in this time, it's not like they could just, oh, my bad, Jacob, I take that back. I'm going to bless your brother Esau instead. It's not like, nowadays you can just like delete a tweet or, delete a Facebook post, but it was when you said something, that your word was set in stone. It was very important. And in fact, if you went back on your word, that you were basically looked down upon at that point. Like you can't just change your word in that time. It was a completely different time. And so he says, bless me also. And Isaac says, I don't have any other blessing for you. And in fact, you're going to be, like I already said, that his brothers are going to serve you. So you're going to be serving your brother until you are ready to shake that yoke from your neck. And so Esau's upset, and that's an understatement. Esau says, when my father dies and we're done mourning, I'm going to kill my brother Jacob. And so, being the great man that Jacob is, he flees out of fear. He's really not kind of the ideal character at this point. He's the trickster and the deceiver, but now he's running away. Jacob flees in fear of Esau. And traveling to the house of his uncle Laban in upper Mesopotamia, and on the way, Jacob dreams of a stairway leading up to heaven where angels and God reside. In that dream, God promises Jacob the same covenant he previously made with Abraham and Isaac. I don't know what Jacob was thinking at that point, if he's just like, what am I doing with my life? I've tricked, I've cheated, or I've lied to my blind father right before his death, and now I'm running away. And, he's probably heard stories of the faithfulness of God and his father Isaac and his grandfather Abraham. And now we see this vision that he has from the Lord. And it says, behold, the Lord stood above it and said, I am the Lord, the God of Abraham your father, and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie I will give to you and to your offspring. Your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth, and you shall spread abroad to the west and to the east and to the north and to the south. And in you and your offspring shall all families of the earth be blessed. Behold, I am with you, and will keep you wherever you go, and will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. Then Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. And he was afraid and said, how awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God. This is the gate of heaven. So, even in the midst of his fear and running from, whether he's running from himself or just his brother after all these things that he's done in his life, God says, I've been faithful to your grandfather Abraham, I've been faithful to your father Isaac, and even despite what you've done, I will be faithful to you as well. And so, as he's running away, he goes to his uncle Laban. You can go to the next slide. So, right here. Jacob had traveled a great distance to find Laban. His mother Rebekah had sent him there to be safe from his angry, murderous twin brother Esau. And during that stay, Jacob fell in love with Rachel and agreed to work 7 years for Laban in return for her hand in marriage. The passage says this. Laban, which was Jacob's uncle, he said to Jacob, "Because you are my kinsman, you should therefore serve me for nothing? Tell me, what shall your wages be?" Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the older was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. Leah's eyes were weak, but Rachel was beautiful in form and appearance. Jacob loved Rachel, and he said, "I will serve 7 years for your younger daughter Rachel." Laban said, "It is better that I give her to you than I should. It is better that I give her to you than that I should give her to any other man. Stay with me." So Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed to him but a few days because of the love he had for her. Jacob fell in love. So he's running away, and he finds his uncle and his family, and he's like, "Oh, well, this is a pretty lady here." So he talks to his uncle. He's like, "Hey, I will work 7 years for your daughter Rachel." And Laban says, "Hey, that sounds like a good deal to me." So he works 7 years, and he's ready. He gets married, and I don't know if there was a veil or what, or how he didn't notice, but the next day after he gets married, he realizes that Laban tricked him. You reap what you sow. Laban tricked him and gave him his older daughter, Leah, the one that that Jacob did not work 7 years for. And Jacob's like, "What is going on?" And he's like, Laban says, "Oh, well, in our culture, we don't marry the younger daughter first. The older daughter needs to marry before the younger can." I kind of feel like that's on Jacob. If you're working somewhere for 7 years, you don't figure something out, you don't ask questions, you don't figure out that, oh, hey, like, she needs to get married first. I feel like you should have figured that out before then. But Jacob says, "All right, well, fine. I'll wait a week, and if you let me marry Rachel like you promised, I'll work another 7 years." And Laban says, "That sounds like a good deal to me." And so after he marries Leah, he marries Rachel, and just long story short, they have a bunch of kids, and there's a lot of, I guess you could say, you play musical wives. There's just, everyone had a bunch of kids, and he eventually had 12 sons, which eventually became the 12 tribes of Israel. And God blesses Jacob in the land of Laban, and he blesses him, and he's faithful, and he shows that he is with Jacob, even in this foreign land. And Laban actually kind of gets upset because Jacob's gaining so much wealth, and he has a big family, and Laban keeps tricking Jacob, trying to change his wages so that it balances out, and God, whether you want to say Jacob tricked Laban and made it go his way, or if you want to say that God was faithful, I think it could have been a mixture of both. But God blesses and honors Jacob, and by giving him a large family and wealth. So we get to the point in stay with me, there's a lot here. Chapter 31, it said, "Now Jacob heard that the sons of Laban were saying, 'Jacob has taken all that was our father's, and from what was our father's he has gained all this wealth.' And Jacob saw that Laban did not regard him with favor as he did before. Then the Lord said to Jacob, 'Return to the land of your fathers, and to your kindred, and I will be with you.'" So God says that to Jacob, and Jacob, he's already been with Laban for about 20 years now, and God tells him to go back to Canaan, back to his family's land. He sneaks off without telling Laban, and Laban chases after him. And God actually tells Laban, "Don't lay a finger on Jacob, because he's my chosen." And so when he catches up with Jacob, and they actually just come to agreement that they're not going to do any harm to each other, even though Laban is still upset for obvious reasons. He's taken away his grandchildren and taken away pretty much all his wealth, but they come at agreement. And so we're at this point where Jacob is, feel like maybe he's learned a few lessons. He's the deceiver, the trickster, but he's also got some of that happening to him. Like Laban wasn't very faithful to him, and he lied to him. But God has shown his faithfulness. He's multiplied his family, his wealth, and his flocks, and now God says, "Now I want you to go back to the land that I promised you." Now, it's kind of taken us a bit to get to this point, but we see kind of Jacob's journey, all the different situations and lessons and things he's done and things that have happened to him. But it's kind of like the life, we've all had our own journey, right, through life. In your walk with Jesus, there may have been times where you really felt like you screwed things up. You made a terrible choice, terrible decision like Jacob did. Maybe you wronged someone. Maybe you're just like, you kept falling into sin, or you wanted to take control of your own situation. Maybe you felt like you couldn't trust God to be faithful to his promises that he's made to you. Or maybe you're someone who hasn't been a Christian for very long, and there was times in your life where you wanted to run because of fear, or you had a reputation that you wanted to kind of to get behind you, or maybe you just have like some bad habits that you feel like, I feel like I'm like deceiving, or maybe I have some problem with family that I just can't forgive or can't get past. And the truth is that we probably could all relate to Jacob a little bit. Because Jacob, as we see, Jacob earned his name. He was a heel grabber right from birth, and then he felt like that was a burden on him, or maybe that was just because he was a deceiver. He just wanted to try to make a name for himself and try to take everything that he could, even though he didn't have to, because God already said that the younger will be Lord over the older, and I will bless the younger. But instead, he took what he wanted. He wanted to make his own way. So we can probably relate to Jacob a little bit. So he was on his way, leaving his father-in-law, running away from Laban, going back to the land his family promised, that God had promised him. And it was inevitable. He's going to run into his brother Esau. It's been probably about 20 years, and the last time he saw him, Esau said, "I'm going to kill you. I'm going to take your life." And so, even though God has been faithful in a land that he'd never been, in the land of his father-in-law Laban, you can imagine what Jacob's feeling. He doesn't know what's going to happen. So let's read in chapter 32, starting in verse 3. So Jacob's getting ready to go back to the land that the Lord promised him, and he knows that his brother, who wanted to kill him, is waiting for him. And so Jacob sent messengers before him to Esau, his brother, in the land of Seir, the country of Edom, instructing them, said, Thus you shall say to my lord Esau, thus says your servant Jacob, I have traveled in the land of Laban and stayed until now. I have oxen, donkeys, flocks, male servants, female servants. I have sent to tell my lord in order that I may find favor in your sight. So he's pleading with him. He's like, hey, I want to see that we're all good. And the messengers returned to Jacob, saying, we came to your brother Esau, and he is coming to meet you. And there are 400 men with him. Then Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed. He divided the people that were with him and the flocks and herds and camels into 2 camps, thinking if Esau comes to one camp and attacks it, then at least one camp will escape. And Jacob said, O God of my father Abraham and God of my father Isaac, O Lord, who said to me, return to your country and to your kindred, that I may do you good. I am not worthy of the least of all the deeds of steadfast love and all the faithfulness that you have shown to your servant. For with only my staff I crossed this Jordan, and now I have become 2 camps. Please deliver me from the hand of my brother and the hand of Esau, for I fear him, that he may come and attack me. The mothers with the children, but you said, I will surely do you good, and make your offspring as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for multitude. So Jacob was pleading with God, and then in verse 22 it says, that same night he arose and he took his 2 wives, his female servants, and his 11 children, and he crossed the ford of Jabbok, and he took them and he sent them across the stream, everything else that he had, and Jacob was left alone. So he takes his whole family, all his possessions, he sends them across the river, and he's now alone. So the last time he saw his brother, he wanted to kill him. Now his brother's coming with him with 400 men. Jacob is afraid for his life and the lives of his family. He's pleading with God. He sends his family across the river with all his possessions, and now he's spending the night alone. And you could say that was a fitful night for Jacob. He spent the night tossing and turning, maybe, but it wasn't because he was worried or because he couldn't find a good pillow that he liked, but it was because he wrestled with God that night. Go to the next slide. Jacob wrestles with God. In verse 23 or 24, it says, Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until the breaking of the day. When the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, he touched his hip socket, and Jacob's hip was put out of joint as he wrestled with him. Then he said, Let me go, for the day is broken. But Jacob said, I will not let you go unless you bless me. And he said to him, What is your name? And he said, Jacob. We can pause right there. You can imagine, he's like, what is your name? And maybe Jacob's thinking, yeah, my name's Jacob. I'm the heel grabber. I'm the deceiver. I'm the one who tricked my brother out of his birthright. I'm the one who lied and deceived my blind father right before he died. And I'm the one who fled my brother and my family out of fear. He says, what is your name? He said, my name is Jacob. Then he said to Jacob, your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with men and have prevailed. Then Jacob asked him, please tell me your name. But he said, why is it that you ask my name? And then he blessed him. So Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, saying, for I have seen God face to face, and yet my life has been delivered. You know, we've been reading a lot today. We read and talked a lot and so much about how Jacob really lived up to his name of the heel grabber, the deceiver. I suppose we could now get into and talk about how he earned his name Israel, which meant you have wrestled with God and with man have prevailed. Well, that was probably the only time that he had physical contact with God or an angel or a representative of God, however you want to say it. Well, that was probably the only time he had physical contact with God. If you look at Jacob's life, he really had been striving with God the whole time. You know, deceiving, stealing, running to and from family members. And as if he could still not place his faith and place his trust in the God who was faithful to his father and was faithful to his grandfather. We could talk about how the heel grabber wrestled with God. And maybe even we could go even a little bit further and see how the people who inherited his name, the people of Israel in the Old Testament, wrestled with God. You know, God saved them out of the hands of the Egyptians, from Pharaoh, from slavery, and yet they still turned to worship an idol right away. And then God gave them men and women of God to lead them, to be a nation of priests, but they said, you know, we want to follow a king, we want to follow a man, just like the other nations. And God said, okay. And even those kings that God sent them, and even those kings that led that nation, this nation that wrestled with God, they more often than not didn't lead them to God. And more often than not did not lead them and place their faith in God. So we could talk about this nation of heel grabbers, I guess you could say. But I want to talk about God. God in his mercy wrestled Jacob back. Go to the next slide. This is me. Oh, right here, that one's me. So most of you know I lost my grandpa about 3 months ago. And this is probably my favorite picture with. And, you know, I know the conflict that brothers have. I have two other brothers. That's my brother Isaac and my brother Ethan. About 2 years old. I'm probably not even 1 year old here. But, yeah, that was, he was a great grandpa. You know, he always did so much for us, and I really only had good memories with him. But, we're wrestling with grandpa here, obviously, and I'm not doing much. I'm not really affecting the situation. But my brothers who are about 2 and 4 years old here, they're going all out, trust me. That's what we did. we did not hold anything back. And even when we wrestled each other, we got some crazy times. But who do you think is really in control of this situation? Yeah. My grandpa is in control of the situation. Yeah, I'm sure my brother thinks that they're winning this. You know, they're going all out, but you know, my grandpa is really it's definitely not me. I can say that for sure. I don't have control. My brothers and I, we probably don't have control of our bodies at this point. We're still like learning how to walk. So my grandpa's in control here. And yeah, so my grandpa's in control, and he has to be in control of this situation. You know, he's not worried one bit about losing this fight. You know, I'm sure we thought we were winning and we're having a lot of fun, but he has to be in control of his body and ours, or I'm going to be the first one that gets hurt here. I'm on the floor, you know, something happens, I'm just a baby. But my grandpa's in control of the situation, and he's also in control of us too, because he could easily, you know, butt back or, you know, take us out, no problem. There's no question. But he's definitely in charge. You know, if he really wanted to, he could have just tossed us back or, you know, thrown us aside. You know, I'm competitive, but, you know, I'm not going to go take out a couple of kids. But, you know, so there's God. And I can't imagine the restraint that God showed towards Jacob when he's wrestling with him. You know, where he lets Jacob wrestle him and even lets Jacob win in the fight. You know, God could have easily just, you know, snapped his fingers and, you know, you're gone. But, yeah, so God is definitely in control of this situation. Those are my notes here. You know, we look at situations in our life where, you know, there's things we do there's situations in our lives when we maybe don't place our faith in God or don't trust Him or don't see that He's acting in our life. And we want to make our own decision. We want to use our own wisdom and our own ability. Can you imagine what we would do if we actually had control of the world and control of the situation? What would happen? We already kind of messed it up when we're out of control of the situation. When God's in control, we already kind of messed things up there. But imagine what would happen if we really were in charge of what we wanted. Thank goodness that not only is God all-knowing, but He is also wise, and He knows what is best in every circumstance. Got a bunch of notes here. You know, so we have God, and I can't imagine the restraint He showed towards Jacob in this situation. So I want us to put our trust and our faith in God today. That whatever you are burdened with, whether it's the news that's going on in the media, or maybe there's a situation in your life, there's a family matter, or maybe you're just struggling with anxiety or problems that are coming up. Let's put our faith and trust